الجزائر الدولية صوتنا في العالم.
تشاهدون برامج إذاعة الجزائر الدولية بالصوت والصورة عبر تقنية لايف ستريم على صفحات التواصل الاجتماعي فيسبوك، تويتر وقناة اليوتيوب لإذاعة الجزائر الدولية. لمزيد من الأخبار تابعوا radioalgerie.dz/Radio Algérie International.
إذاعة الجزائر الدولية صوتنا في العالم.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, the Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Army General Sachin Griha, is on an official visit to India. The Council of the European Union has admitted defeat before the Court of Justice of the European Union, which invalidated two trade agreements between Morocco and the EU on fisheries and agriculture, stressing the need to comply with the court's decision. The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas has strongly condemned and rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's statements aimed at occupying the Gaza Strip and displacing the Palestinian people from it. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has made a partial movement in the Corps of Presidents of Courts and Public Prosecutors attached to the Courts of Justice in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, notably Article 92 and 181 and Article 49 of the Organic Law on the status of the judiciary. The Minister of State in charge of Foreign Affairs, National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, today received a phone call from his Turkish counterpart, Mr. Hakan Fidan. The call was an opportunity to discuss the Algerian-Turkish partnership in preparation for the third session of the Joint Planning Committee. The two ministers also discussed developments in the Middle East and efforts to stabilize the ceasefire agreement in the Gaza Strip. Now, the Minister delegates to the Minister of National Defense, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Army General Sachin Griha, is starting today an official visit to the Republic of India at the invitation of the Chief of the Defense Staff and Secretary of the Department of Military Affairs of India. During this visit, which comes within the framework of strengthening cooperation between the Army and the Indian Army, the two parties will examine issues of common concern. The magazine Al Jaish states in its February issue under the title Algeria's African Depth, a Strategic Choice, that Algeria, as a key player in achieving integration and stability in Africa, is paying particular attention to the unification of ranks on the continent, in the firm belief that its African extension obliges it to work tirelessly to make this aspiration a reality. Inspired by its immutable principles and the values of its glorious revolution in its relations with its partners, including good neighborliness and the establishment of friendly relations and cooperation in its regional and international environment, Algeria is also contributing to efforts aimed at enabling Africa to establish full sovereignty over its territories and wealth, as well as the independence of its sovereign decision, says Al Jaish, adding that this is how Africa will succeed in definitely ridding of the heavy legacies inherited from colonialism, which is largely responsible for the unenviable situation the continent is experiencing. Said Bouazi has more details in this report.
For the magazine Al Jaish, this requires greater solidarity and synergy between African countries and a strong impetus for the overall development of our continent, which brings together all the factors enabling it to embark resolutely on the path of development, progress and prosperity. In this respect, the UN Security Council last month welcomed Algeria's role as an African leader in preventing and combating terrorism, while recognizing for the first time, at Algeria's insistence, the fundamental role played by the various existing African security mechanisms recalls the same source. An achievement that represents an honor and recognition of its leading role in combating the scourge of terrorism and establishing stability and security on the African continent, the editorial states, adding that this recognition further increases Algeria's responsibility in that the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, is Africa's spokesman in the fight against terrorism and has been given the task of monitoring this issue at continental level. The editorial goes on to say that Algeria has an unfailing determination to honor its commitments to Africa, just as it remains deeply attached to its African depth as a strategic choice. In this respect, El Jaish highlights the address by the President of the Republic at the 11th session of the Oran High-Level Seminar on Peace and Security in Africa in December 2024, in which he declared that Algeria reaffirms its constant commitment to support any effort that contributes to expressing our interests in Africa with a single voice, promising to be a unifier that unites and does not divide, a supporter that supports and does not disappoint, and a voice that rises and does not fall when it comes to defending the concerns, causes and aspirations of our states. El Jaish affirms that in the light of a turbulent regional and international situation characterized by the multiplication of crises and tensions, Algeria continues to call on African countries to enshrine the principle of African solutions to African problems, which has been and will remain a strategic objective, far from any foreign interference or polarization between major powers. Taking the view that there can be no development without the establishment of security and stability, El Jaish underlines that Algeria, through the National People's Army, is making sure that security cooperation mechanisms are activated and that it fulfills the role incumbent on it in its continental area in order to contribute to the establishment of security and peace on our continent.
Now, the Secretary-General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Lounas Megraman, has co-chaired with the Secretary-General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Jassim Uddin, the proceedings of the second session of the political dialogue between Algeria and Bangladesh. This session provided an opportunity for the two parties to review the state of friendship and cooperation relations between the two countries, and to examine ways and means of strengthening and promoting them in various priority areas, notably the fields of energy, agriculture, higher education and trade. These political consultations also provided an opportunity to set out points of view and exchange analyses on a number of regional and international issues of common concern, including the Palestinian and Western Sahara causes, the situation in the Sahel region, and efforts to reform the UN Security Council. Now, the Secretary of State to the Energy Minister in charge of renewable energies, Noordin Yessa, has received a delegation from the People's Republic of Bangladesh, led by the Secretary-General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Jassim Uddin, on a visit to Algeria. During the meeting, which took place in the presence of the ministry officials, the two parties reviewed the state of bilateral relations and the prospects for their development in the fields of energy, renewable energies and energy efficiency. Now, the Secretary of State to the Minister of Energy in charge of mines, Karima Tafer, has highlighted in Cape Town, South Africa, Algeria's efforts to develop the mining sector, stressing that the sector underlining that is full of promising opportunities, supported by an ambitious government program aimed at attracting investment and reinforcing the attractiveness of the sector. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Now to the Western Sahara file. The Council of the European Union has admitted defeat before the Court of Justice of the European Union, which in October 2024 invalidated two trade agreements between Morocco and the EU on fisheries and agriculture, stressing the need to comply with the court's decisions, reveals a note from its legal service unveiled by the International Observatory Western Sahara Resource Watch. Zaid Bouazi has the details.
In a legal note, the Council of the European Union acknowledges that the EU's highest court has definitively annulled the EU-Morocco trade and fisheries agreements as they apply to Western Sahara, marking a clear victory for the Sahrawi people's struggle for self-determination, the International Observatory Western Sahara Resource Watch welcomed on its website. On 4th October 2024, the Grand Chamber of the EU Court of Justice ruled on 4 appeals lodged by the Council and the Commission of the EU, supported by several member states and Moroccan entities, against earlier rulings by the Court of First Instance annulling the agreements. In its rulings, the court confirmed that the EU-Morocco trade and fisheries agreements had been illegally extended to Western Sahara without the consent of its people, contrary to international law. For years, the EU has ignored rulings by its own courts that its agreement with Morocco covering Western Sahara were illegal. In an information note dated 11th November 2024, the Council's legal service itself acknowledged for the first time that the Sahrawi people had won in court. This is an important political and legal moment in the long struggle of the Sahrawi people against the Moroccan occupation and the complicity of the EU, said Sarah Ekmans of Western Sahara Resource Watch. She expressed her hope that the EU would henceforth act strictly in accordance with international law and finally stop looking for new ways to circumvent decisions. We hope that this analysis by the Council's legal service will mark a turning point in the EU's approach to Western Sahara, she added. In its note, the Council's legal service confirms that the EU institutions must now take steps to comply with the rulings of the Court of Justice of the European Union.
Now, Moroccan unions have called for the holding of the first general strike since 2016. Morocco's main trade unions have led the parliamentary session to approve the strike law and have called for demonstrations on the 5th and 6th of February, today and tomorrow. Now, in other news, the Arab Interparliamentary Union has strongly condemned the continuation of the Israeli aggression, assassinations, arrests and the destruction of buildings in the Jenin camp in the occupied West Bank, as well as the attempts to sabotage the humanitarian process of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza by hindering the entry of the most essential needs. In a statement signed by its chairman, Brahim Boughali, Speaker of the National People's Assembly, the union warned that the transfer of aggression from Gaza to the West Bank and taking of escalation measures such as isolating towns, setting up roadblocks and tightening the noose around citizens, as well as imposing a total blockade, are part of a Zionist plan to annex large areas of the West Bank. For her part, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, Francesca Albanese, has said that she is shocked at the defiance towards international law, not just by the Israeli occupying authorities, but by most countries in the international community.
Let me go fast forward. I'm shocked to see how little the international community, including countries in Europe, have registered the seismic paradigm shift that has been prompted by the ICJ, the International Court of Justice advisory opinion last year. The fact that it's an advisory opinion doesn't mean that it's not binding. It's binding because it's premised upon non-derogable norms of international law. This advisory opinion has concluded that the Israeli presence, not just the military presence, Israeli presence, both army and settlements, is unlawful. It is to be seized unconditionally and as soon as possible and totally. So Israel needs to remove whatever material, immaterial, tangible, intangible, civilian and military it has established in the occupied Palestinian territory. Full stop.
That was the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, Francesca Albanese. Now the Israeli occupying forces are continuing their wanton aggression against the city of Jenin and its camp for the 16th consecutive day, resulting in 25 dead and dozens of wounded, in addition to the bombing of dozens of homes, forced displacement and widespread destruction of infrastructure. Said Bouazi reports.
Rescue teams from Jenin Civil Defense were able to evacuate an injured young man from a destroyed building in the Ed Danger neighborhood of the city's camp, despite the difficulties they had to endure due to the extensive destruction in the streets, roads, and entrances to the camp. In addition, the occupying forces arrested a young Palestinian man at his home in the Sabah neighborhood in the city of Jenin, while they arrested another young Palestinian near El Amal Hospital in the El Mahta neighborhood before assaulting him and blindfolding him. The Zionist occupation army continues to lay siege to the government hospital in Jenin after razing its entrance and the main street leading to it. According to its director Wissam Bakr, the hospital, which previously provided care to around 40,000 Palestinians in the Jenin governorate, is now almost empty due to the actions of the occupying forces and the harassment of patients. The governor of Jenin pointed out that the architecture and demography of the Jenin camp is in danger of changing completely due to the bombardments and the destruction of houses and infrastructure caused by the occupying forces. The Zionist army continues to bomb and destroy several houses in the camp, while at the same time sending continuous military reinforcements from the Jelami checkpoint.
As you followed in our top stories, U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order withdrawing the U.S. from the UN Human Rights Council and the UN Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, and demanding a review of U.S. involvement in the UN Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. Tuesday's order is one of dozens the president has signed since returning to the White House last month. It appears to fall within the scope of Trump's far-reaching America First policy, which prioritizes domestic U.S. interests over those of the broader international community. In a statement to the reporters in New York, the permanent ambassador of the State of Palestine to the UN, Riyad Mansour, reacted to the decision, saying although it will create additional hardship for the Palestinian refugees, but there are a large number of countries ready to defend UNRWA.
If he is reiterating that, it's very unfortunate. The Palestinian people, especially in the Gaza Strip, and the refugees are entitled to the services from this very important agency. The most successful story of success of multilateralism and the UN is UNRWA. It is in the business of humanitarian assistance. So therefore it needs funding in order to be able to carry its mandate from the General Assembly, not from any single country. So therefore, I think, although that would create additional hardship for the community of Palestine refugees, but there are so many countries. There are more than 125 countries in the alliance to defend, UNRWA here at the UN. Many of them are major funders of UNRWA. They pledged they will continue to pay and to defend UNRWA to carry its mandate until there is a just solution to the question of the refugees.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has said that the United States will take over and own Gaza after an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from the besieged enclave under an extraordinary plan that he claimed could turn the enclave into the Riviera of the Middle East. In a reaction, the Hamas resistance movement has strongly condemned and rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's statements aimed at occupying the Gaza Strip and displacing the Palestinian people from it. In a statement to the reporters in New York, the permanent ambassador of the State of Palestine to the UN, Riyad Mansour, said that the Palestinians chose to go back to their homes in the Gaza Strip and their choice must be respected.
Our country and our home is the Gaza Strip. It's part of Palestine. We have no home. For those who want to send them to a happy, nice place, Let them go back, to their original homes inside Israel. There are nice places there, and they will be happy to return to these places. But in the meantime, our homeland is our homeland. If part of it is destroyed, the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian people selected the choice to return to it. In 2 days, in a span of few hours, 400,000 Palestinians walking returned to the northern part of the Gaza Strip. I think that we should be respecting the selections and the wishes of the Palestinian people.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Now, today we shed light on two key events that Al Jaish magazine evoked this month. The magazine referred to the commemoration this February of the National Day of the Shaheed, the barbaric aggression perpetrated by the colonial air force against the Tunisian village of Sarid Sidi Youssef, and the nuclear tests in southern Algeria, which are an eternal stain on the face of the colonial fronts. We invite you now to listen to this short broadcast on the nuclear tests in southern Algeria, followed by a program on the horrific massacre which took place in the Tunisian village of Sarid Sidi Youssef.